Part 1.
You'll hear a man calling a catering company. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5. Hello, 5-star caterers. Can I help you?
Oh, yes. I spoke to you an hour ago about the arrangements for our end-of-term party.
Oh, that's right. It's Mr. Saunders, isn't it?
Actually, it's Sanders. That's S-A-N-D-E-R-S.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just get that down correctly on the form. Okay, Mr. Sanders, sorry about that.
No problem. Well, I've got the details you asked for, so I thought I should call you back quickly and book.
Good. Let's fill in the form, shall we?
Great.
First of all, can you give me a telephone number? Somewhere where you can be contacted during the day.
Yes, it's 445-6786.
445-6786. Okay. And do you have a number where you can be contacted outside of office hours?
Well, I'm at work till late in the evening, so use the same number, and if I'm not there, you can leave a message.
Thanks. I'll make a note of that. And how many guests shall I put down?
Okay, that's changed. So instead of the figure I gave you before of 85, it's now only 50. It's much lower, I'm afraid, because a lot of people can't make that date.
That's not a problem. Can you remind me of the date we'd set?
Yes, it's the 25th of June.
Okay, that's fine. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10. Now, did you have the chance to look at the tables on the website?
Yes, I did. And I think the rectangular tables would be good. The long, thin ones.
Yes, you could have 2 of those. The only problem is that they're for 24 people. So, you'd only seat 48 people that way. And if you have 50 guests...
Oh, I see what you mean. 2 people would have nowhere to sit. What about the square ones?
You'd have the same problem with numbers. Usually, for 50 people, we find the round tables work well. Not the smaller ones. They only seat 6 people. The ones that seat 10, the large ones.
So do you think we should have 5 of those?
I think that would work well.
Okay, that's what we'll do then.
Fine. And have you decided on the menu you would like?
Yes, I think so. But I wanted to ask you, we talked about having the 3-course meal with waiter service, but in the end, we thought it would be a bit too formal.
So that leaves the buffet or the 7-course banquet.
How much is a banquet again?
£100 a head.
That's too much and too formal. The buffet is fine.
Okay, so I think I've got everything. We'd need a deposit of 50% of the total.
Right. What's the total?
Just a minute. Yes, it's £30 a head times 50, so that's £1,500. 50% of that would be $750 now, with the balance due another $750 on the day.
Great. I'll call in tomorrow if that's okay. I can pay you the deposit then.
We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow then.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to part 2. Part 2.
You will hear a man being interviewed on local radio about a plan to improve a suburb called Red Hill. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Good morning and welcome again to Your City Today. With me today is Graham Campbell, a councillor from the City Council. He'll be telling us about the plan to improve the fast-growing suburb of Red Hill. Good morning, Graham, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Carol.
Now, Graham, I understand that there has been a lot of community consultation for the new plan.
Yes, we've tried to address some of the concerns that local groups told us about. People we've heard from are mainly worried about traffic in the area and in particular the increasing speed of cars near schools. They feel that it's only a matter of time before there's an accident as a lot of children walk to the school. So we're trying to do something about that. Another area of concern is the overhead power lines. These are very old and a lot of people we spoke to asked if something could be done about them. Well, I'm happy to report that the power company have agreed to move the power lines underground at a cost of $800,000. I think that will really improve the look of the area as well as being safer.
That's good to know. But will that mean an increase in rates for the local businesses in that area?
Well, the power company have agreed to bear the cost of this themselves after a lot of discussion with the council. This is wonderful news, as the council now has some extra funds for us to put into other things like tree planting and artwork.
Before you hear the rest of the interview, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Now, we've also put together a map which we've sent out to all the residents in the area. And on the map we've marked the proposed changes. Firstly, we'll plant mature pine trees to provide shelter and shade just to the right of the supermarket in Days Road. In order to address the traffic problems, the pavements on the corner of Carberry and Thomas Street will be widened. This will help to reduce the speed of vehicles entering Thomas Street. We think it's very important to separate the local residential streets from the main road, so the roadway at the entrance to Thomas Street from Days Road will be painted red. This should mark it more clearly and act as a signal for traffic to slow down. One way of making sure that the pedestrians are safe is to increase signage at the intersections. A Keep Clear sign will be erected at the junction of Evelyn Street and Hill Street to enable traffic to exit at all times. Something we're planning to do to help control the flow of traffic in the area is to install traffic lights halfway down Hill Street where it crosses Days Road. Now, we haven't only thought about the cars and traffic, of course. There's also something for the children. We're going to get school children in the area to research a local story, the life of a local sports hero, perhaps. And an artist will incorporate that story into paintings on the wall of a building on the other side of Hill Street from the supermarket. And finally, we've agreed to build a new children's playground, which will be at the other end of Hill Street, close to the intersection with Carberry Street.
Wonderful. Now, what's the next stage?
Well, the final plan...
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear 2 students discussing a presentation they should give. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Dan.
I'm glad I'm working with you on this presentation. I was a bit confused in that lecture, and I'm not really sure what we have to do.
Yes, it was a bit confusing, but I'm sure we can work it out together.
This is the first presentation that I've done on the course, and I'm not looking forward to speaking in front of everyone.
I did some on the last module and everyone was very supportive, don't worry.
Okay, so where do we start? Professor Michael said we could choose any of the topics in our course book, and that's over 30. It's going to take ages to go through all of those.
No, he said we had to choose from the topic list he showed us, but that all the topics were covered in the course book. There's actually only 6 to choose from on the list.
Oh, yes, I see them here. Well, that makes the choice a little easier. How about globalization?
Yes, I think that would be the most interesting. Okay, so we have to do quite a bit of research. We can't just include the information from the course book if we want a good grade for this. Professor Michael said that he wanted a range of sources. There's a reading list in the course book, so we'll start with some books from the library, and then we'll also need to find some articles in the journals and look online.
Lots of reading then.
Yes, and then the next thing to do is to decide on a structure.
Yes, that's right. We need an overview. I know that's really important. Then, shall we talk about advantages and disadvantages?
Yes, okay. Shall I take the advantages and you take the disadvantages?
Okay, fine. What about any written information?
Well, we don't have to use visuals, but it might help.
Well, I'm quite good with computers, so I don't mind doing a PowerPoint presentation, and then we can print a copy and give it out as a handout.
Brilliant! Oh, it says here that we must give everyone a copy of our bibliography, so maybe include that in the handout.
Okay. I have some free time now if you wanted to get started on some research.
Great! We don't need too much information, though. It says here in the guidelines that we will lose marks if we talk for too long. It's only 10 minutes, so that's 5 minutes each.
Well, let's make sure we do lots of practice beforehand. Then we can make any changes and also make sure we don't go over the time limit.
Exactly!
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 27 to 30.
Great! I feel much better now. Oh, you're also going to have to help me with the bibliography. I think I did it wrong last term. My professor wasn't very happy.
Yeah, they all say they're very important. It's easy, really. Just takes a while. It helps if you do it as you go along, so when we do the research, make a note of all the information that you need.
That's a good idea. So we need the author's name and the title of the chapter.
Oh, no, you don't need the chapter title, just the title of the book.
Oh, really? And what about page numbers?
No, not all the time. They are only important if we give direct quotes, and we won't be doing that.
Okay. Is that all?
No, you also need to give the year of publication.
Where do you find that?
On the first page, usually next to the ISBN number. Oh, and you need the publisher's name.
Got it. Why is this so important for this presentation anyway?
It's because of the assessment. We get a mark for our research, so we need to show evidence of what we've done.
Really? What else do we get marked on?
Let's see. In my last presentation, we received a mark for delivery, pace, and organisation.
Wow, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah, but it's much simpler this time. The only other area we'll be marked on is content.
Okay, so we only get 2 marks?
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, should we get going?
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to part 4. Part 4.
You will hear a university professor giving a lecture on the influence of children on the adult diet. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. Today we continue with our series of lectures on diet and society in the 21st century. We are all aware of the obesity epidemic facing our society. The reasons for this are well documented and are mainly due to poor eating habits coupled with too little exercise. In fact, a national health and nutrition survey here in the U.S. concluded that the average total food intake increased considerably between the years 1971 and 2000. This appears to be a general trend across most age groups. In fact, apart from the over 60s, all areas of American society are consistently above the dietary guidelines for caloric intake and saturated fat. However, total fat consumption is highest for teenagers, and there is a clear correlation with fast food consumption. Among the wide range of factors influencing an individual's dietary choices, one of the strongest influences is the home. It will come as no surprise that within a family, the fat intakes of husbands and wives and parents and children who cohabit are remarkably similar. Many people assume that this relationship indicates the influence of parents on their children, but we wanted to ask, if children influence poor diets in adults. This hypothesis had not been tested in a national sample until now. In our study, we focused only on adults, and we set our lower age limit at 17 and the upper one at 65. The key variable was the presence or absence of children, so we identified only those adults whose children were under 17. Other variables included the age of the adult, level of education they had reached, their ethnic background, their income, and foreign-born status. To obtain our data, first we conducted interviews in the respondents' own homes, and all in all, we interviewed 6,600 adults aged over 17. Then we invited them to mobile examination centers where surveys were conducted. From this information, we were able to focus not only on the total fat intake, but also on the person's total caloric consumption. Our results show that the presence of children led to significantly higher levels of both fat consumption and saturated fat in adults. We found on average that adults with children in the home ate 4.9 grams per day of fat more than adults without children. This result is consistent irrespective of race, gender, or age. The foods more commonly were convenience items high in fat or sugar, including pizza, salty snacks, and ice cream. Interestingly, there is a significantly higher percentage of adults in this group who drink milk. There are many explanations for this increased fat intake. Hectic schedules where parents try to balance work, family, and leisure put time at a premium. Another issue is children's preference for fatty foods or foods with a high sugar content. Fast foods and ready-to-eat foods are convenient choices. It is inconvenient to prepare different meals for both the children and the parents, so it is likely that adults consume the same as their children. Of course, there were limitations to our study. One of these is that we did not take into account the number of minors in each household, which could have an effect on the adult who feeds the children. In addition, this study does not take into account the relationship of the adult to the minor. We could also postulate that the older a child gets, the more independent he or she becomes, and so the influence a child has on an adult may lessen depending on the age of the child. In terms of recommendations as a result of this study, we would like to see more research conducted to overcome the limitations outlined earlier. We also feel there is a need for even further research into the influence that friends can have on our fat intake, given the clear link we've established between family members.
That is the end of part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers.